As we've been exploring the Christianity in America, we've seen that there are various groups within the overarching Christian label. One of the groups that I want to look at today is the Moravians, or the Church of the Brethren. They were actually formally organized back in 1457 in eastern Bohemia, but they did come to America during the colonial era. One of the main people who influenced and is kind of notable amongst the Moravians is the pietist Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. He actually helped to renew the Moravian Church through his patronage, and actually helped to found one of the more well-known communities of Moravians, the community that was formed in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Now, I actually grew up just outside of Bethlehem, and have been to Bethlehem and seen what's still left from the original Moravian community that was started there. And there's still, like I said, an establishment that's there. Now, they started off there in 1741 in George Whitfield's estate, and eventually they grew and expanded. There was a community that was formed in Nazareth, which isn't too far from there. So with that, the Moravians actually were influential both to George Whitfield as well as Charles Wesley, so that's part of their contribution there. They also, like I said, the Bethlehem became the center of the Moravian activity, but they did establish other communities, like I mentioned, in Nazareth. There were communities in New Jersey, Maryland, and North Carolina as well. Now, the Moravians were pacifists, and they had a strong desire to spread the gospel to the frontier, specifically to the Native Americans, as well as then to those who were involved in slavery. According to John F. Sensbach, who actually wrote a book called Rebecca's Revival that focused on the Moravians and their influence in the Caribbean, he said that the Moravian Brethren embarked on what they considered their divine mission to preach among indigenous and enslaved people of color wherever they could. So they had a strong belief that they were called to share God's love with those who were poor and those who were not as well liked by other people. So they were actually willing to adapt and live among these groups when others weren't. David Zeisberger helped to lead a mission to the Iroquois in Pennsylvania that did not pan out, and then he ended up going and working with the Delawares, which was more successful, and a lot of the Indians actually converted to the religion, and now some of the settlers weren't so convinced of the fact that they had become pacifists, so it caused some issues in the area. So he ended up, rather than having them settle just outside of Bethlehem like he had hoped, he moved them to the Ohio Territory. Again, there were disputes with the settlers. It wasn't safe for them there, so he ended up moving them up to Ontario, where they would eventually spend several generations there. The Moravians also then went to Georgia and were successful among the Cherokee as well. So Marginal suggests that perhaps because the Moravians themselves were people on the margin of colonial America without any wealth or influence of their own, they seemed readier to adapt to the Native American way, so it helped them be able to kind of relate and probably have a better mission among that group. They were also influential in taking the gospel to the Caribbean, like I mentioned, ministering to the slaves there. They actually, again, integrated in there and tried to sell themselves into slavery and become enslaved there. So now it's a small denomination. It's not very large in America anymore. It's spread, like I said, to the Caribbean and to Africa, so there's Moravians all over the world, but they were influential, like I mentioned, in Bethlehem, in Pennsylvania, They did establish Salem Academy and College, as well as Moravian College and Theological Seminary, as well as preparatory schools.